Thank you everyone for joining us. The Utah Nonprofits Association is very grateful for Congressman Stewart's time and his team this afternoon. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment and from my home, I would like to acknowledge the unceded lands of the Goshute, Eastern Shoshone, and Ute peoples, and the continued existence and contributions of Indigenous people who have lived on and cared for this land for thousands of years. Thank you. And without further ado, I would like to turn the time now over to Congressman Stewart.
All right, well, thank you, Brandy. Great to be with you. Love UNA and what you guys do. And look, I really mean that. I mean, everyone comes on, you always say, I love you guys, thanks for everything. But look, you guys do something really special. And there's no doubt about that. And, you know, Brandy, you and everyone else on this conference call, I hope you don't ever go home and wonder, well, did I do any good today? And by the way, I do all the time in my job, go home and wonder, did I accomplish anything today or this week? But I hope you guys don't ever feel that way. And I don't imagine you do. And that's one of the reasons that so many of you are involved with this, is because that personal sense of satisfaction that you guys really are making a difference in the world, and usually just one person at a time. But it's so important. And I want you to know too, that I've tried to, you know, back up my words with efforts as well in other things in my own life, and the commitment I have to nonprofits, whether it's in faith or whether it's in supporting other organizations. But I want to mention just a couple that we've done just while I've been in Congress. The Children's Justice Centers, several of them around the district, around the state, and the incredible work they do for really, really vulnerable people, mothers and in many cases, young children who have found themselves in some cases, just very dramatic and really disheartening conditions or situations in life. And they have these justice centers that are saving these people, sometimes literally saving them, and sometimes saving them in a more ambiguous way, but putting them in a much better position in life. Food banks. We've had food drives. We've collected for food banks around the state, and I just took a whole bunch of food to the food bank here in my own home community just about a month ago. Really, almost more than I could get in the back of my truck, as it turned out. And there's a long story about how that happened, but I won't take the time to talk about that. I want to share one that Gary and I heard, and I think Gary and Connor, two of my staff, are online with me. And by the way, I got to take a minute to just thank my staff. They're incredible, and it's you know, I am no better than my staff, and that's just true. And I hope you guys who have a chance to work with them see that. And if not, please come talk to me, because if there's anything that we think or that you think we can do for you, and you may not be getting that, again, please come talk to me. But I don't think that's ever going to happen because I have such incredible staff. But Gary and I were talking with a group this morning who, and this isn't nonprofit oriented, but the initiation of it is, and that is talking about refugee community, who, you know, we've been supportive of and have done, you know, a drive for school supplies for refugees, for example. I think we did that about 3 years ago, and oh my gosh, we had more school supplies than they could possibly accept. Actually, we filled up rooms and rooms of it because the community responded so generously to that. But we were talking with an organization today that takes refugees and others who are here to, and part of the training they give them is English as a second language. But they also realized that they could begin to teach them coding and some of the really in-demand, you know, technological certificates they could get, and do it fairly quickly. I mean, in some cases, 6 to 9 months. And while these refugees are learning English, they also are learning this coding. And the starting wage was $90,000. I mean, that's a remarkable thing for, I mean, talk about changing someone's life, to come here as a refugee and then be given that type of training with that type of earning potential in a shorter period of time. I mean, that's just a wonderful collaboration between a kind of a public partner-private partnership. Look, I could go on, Brandy, and everyone else who's online, but I won't. I'll just say that when I express how grateful I am to you, I want you to know I really mean that. Let me talk to you just briefly about, you know, Washington, D.C. and kind of where we are, and then where I think where we're going to going, and then we'll see what's on your minds. It was about a year ago for most of us, we realized, holy cow, the world is going to change. It's changing overnight as the coronavirus has begun to, as we began to really face how dramatic and what a challenge this was going to be. 27 million jobs lost in about 6 weeks. I mean, we took a global economy, a globally interconnected economy, and around the globe just shut it down. And so, as I said, 27 million jobs here in the United States. Well, a lot of those people were unprepared for unemployment. And I know you guys are very sensitive to this, but a lot of Americans were shocked about a year ago to see people lined up for miles to get some food and groceries at a food bank. Well, you guys had to serve those people, but at the same time, your contributions just weren't stepping up because people were afraid for their own financial health and their financial well-being, and they didn't know. I imagine they just didn't feel like they could maybe be as generous as they had in the past, and that's true from the corporate level on down. And I want to give this just a little bit of context, because one of the things I really was pleased at in the last year was the way that Congress and the administration and the American people stepped up to really make a difference. And it was pretty remarkable what happened there. Again, to give it a little context, I was at the White House on January 31st, and it was quite late at night. It was about 10:30. I was there talking to some folks, and there was a lot of activity on the second floor. And I asked them, what are you guys doing up here this late? And they said, well, we're standing up our coronavirus task force. And at that point, there were hardly any Americans had paid any attention to the coronavirus at all. But in the U.S. government and sitting on the Intelligence Committee, we'd been watching it for about 4 weeks or maybe a little bit longer at that point. And we began to really realize this is probably going to be something meaningful. And it was 2 weeks later, so now we're talking mid-February, where in Congress, we began to realize, hey, we're going to have to help. We're going to have to help the states. We're going to have to help communities and some private organizations. And we began to write a bill, and that first draft of that bill on the Appropriations Committee, where I sit, we were trying to decide, is it going to be $2 billion, or are we going to have to spend more, and maybe up to $4 billion? And I was saying, look, everyone, $4 billion, that's a lot of money. I mean, imagine what the Army could do with $4 billion, or imagine what National Institutes of Health could do with $4 billion. Do we really need to spend that much money? And then, this is crazy, it's just remarkable. 2 weeks later, we passed, well, actually 2.5, we passed a bill for $2 trillion. We went from 2 billion to 8 billion to 2 trillion in less than 3 weeks. And by the way, that passed with absolutely unanimous support, with one exception of one guy in the House who votes no on virtually everything. Completely unanimous in the House, completely unanimous in the Senate. And it was actually a pretty good example too of the government and Congress and the administration stepping up, saying we have to do something to help here, and organizations stepping up as well. Everything from the SBA to banks around the country who had to administer and distribute a lot of that money. And it turns out that distributing trillions of dollars in a short period of time is not an easy thing to do. And it wasn't perfect, but it really made a difference. And I know that nonprofits, where you guys are in a little bit of a niche there, where there was a little uncertainty about, could you take advantage of PPP? Are there funds going to be funds that made available to you? And I want you to know that there were many of us who recognized that you had such a unique role that we had to provide funding for the nonprofits as well. And I'm so grateful we did that. Now, one other comment I'll make on that legislation was that we did it so quickly. We realized we were going to have gaps, and there were going to be some things that we didn't get right. And so we wrote the legislation in such a way that it was easy to amend and easy to come back and to fill the gaps, or to kind of backfill some of the language, so that we could make sure that people who we certainly didn't intend to be excluded were not. And the point of that being is you had to get the money to people as quickly as you could. You have to give them certainty that this wasn't a loan, that this wasn't going to be a financial burden for them. This was to help businesses stay open and to help people keep their jobs. And we were very grateful for the way that worked out. And again, we know that nonprofits had a very specific niche in there, but I'm interested in your feedback on how that worked out for you. Well, since then we passed another stimulus, and it's interesting. I had a chance today. We were waiting to the First Lady came in, and as we were waiting for her airplane to land. We were in a room talking with Spencer Cox and with Mayor Mendenhall and Mayor Wilson and a few others. And they were talking about the second round that was just passed recently. And I have to tell you, and many of you may know that I actually didn't support that. The reason being is it was just so much money and it wasn't well targeted. I wanted to target the hospitality industry, for example, and nonprofits, for example, probably some others who've just been devastated by this. But by and large, most places around the country, the economy is coming back quite strongly. So I supported a more targeted, additional funding. But anyway, we ended up spending, as you know, about $1.9 trillion again, and that scares me a little bit with the amount of money that is. But as we were talking with the governor and the mayors, we realized as well that language wasn't clear, and so they gave this money to the states, but they don't know how to spend it, and they just have no guidance right now of what programs they can spend that money on and which ones they can't. And it's a little frustrating for them and a little frustrating for me to have this money available but not to be able to use it because there's so much uncertainty on the rules of how that money could be engaged. And I'm really, really glad that didn't happen in the first round because we just couldn't wait days. Last thing I'll say on that, and then maybe one other thought, and then we'll see what's on you guys' mind. For months, all I did was be on the phone for long, long days, talking to people who were scared, business owners, everyone from the.
Congressman, you may have muted yourself. We cannot see you either. We're going to roll with this, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, I think I hear the congressman. There he is.
There we go.
Did you lose me for a little bit?
We did, at least the last like 2 minutes.
Man, 2 minutes, that's way too long. I can't
Maybe
remember what
it wasn't, I don't know. Maybe it was just because I was so nervous that your mic went off.
Your lost, yeah. Okay, well, anyway, I was just saying we met with a lot of businesses, everyone from, did you hear that part about, everyone from big companies down to a young man who washes windows for a living, but he has 4 kids. And he was scared to death. And I remember he was in tears, just scared to death. What am I going to do? I can't feed my family. And it was so grateful that we could tell him, hey, this is what we're going to be able to do for you, and it was necessary to do. So I know that, question that's going to come up, I'm going to just wait and see what's on you guys' minds, but I do hope we get a chance to talk a little bit about the future because I am very optimistic and there's many, many reasons why we should be. So Brandy or Kate or whoever, are there things that you guys want to talk about, or other people who are on the phone? I want to make sure that we get a chance to hear from you.
That's fantastic. In fact, I do believe that Kate has a question. Kate?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Congressman, for your remarks there. I think that all of us in nonprofit land, as we like to call it, have been really just waiting to see what the guidance looks like from Treasury so that the states know how to spend all of that money that's coming in. And I think, if you could, my question is sort of twofold. And maybe I'll ask this one first, and then if I can get a follow-up, that'd be great.
Okay, but, hey, Kate.
Yeah.
Before you ask your question, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How has it impacted all of you? Because I know a year ago, I talked with several of you, many of you actually. I think we did a town hall with you guys. And I mean, we were really looking at an uncertain future. How has it worked out in the last, 6 months or so? Have things gotten better for the nonprofits? And as far as, a little bit of relief on, the demands of your resources, and also have people in the organization stepped up to help you?
So I'm going to go to my second question, which comes with some data that we are going to release very soon. This is hot data that we have just been sifting through. So I'm so sorry to my communications team for me to sort of drop some of these nuggets. We just recently did a survey because your direct question of how's it going, right?
Yeah.
All of the support that nonprofits have received in the PPP funding and in the EIDL loans and the grants, that really helped nonprofits propel forward, and it helped nonprofits bring back staff. It helped them stay afloat. And we know that because we are nonprofit professionals that are just fueled with passion and desire to serve our communities and our missions, that a lot of nonprofits flew on that wing and a prayer to get through the last 15 months, 12 months, depending on when your time starts with that, right? So we just did a survey. We closed it a couple of days ago. We're just sifting through some of the data. We asked a very specific question. We asked about jobs. In 2019, how many people were employed? In 2020, how many people did you employ? And in 2021, what do you expect your employee count to be?
And Kate, just so I understand, to make sure, this was a survey to nonprofits.
Survey that we did of our members, our nonprofit members. So we're gathering the nonprofit landscape.
Yeah.
Nonprofit organizations are projected to have nearly 3,000 fewer jobs in 2021 than they had in 2019. So that's how it's going, right? And that's why we're very curious about how we can help the state understand where the needs of nonprofits are, so that as they're working through that guidance on how to spend all of that money that's coming to the states, especially in Utah, we could really use it to bolster our support of the employees that do the work in our nonprofit organizations. Yeah. Because if we don't have employees, we can't feed the hungry, make sure that people who are experiencing homelessness have case management, like all of those things begin to dwindle. So that's sort of like how it's going and the projection. And Jill on my team, I know, has been really sifting through and looking through that data, and she might have an opportunity to pop in and give some of the highlights.
Okay. Well, let me respond to that quickly if I could, Kate, and then we'll come back to your other questions. But I'm going to cheat actually and ask one more question at the end of this, because there's something else I do want to know from you, or again, Brandy, or whoever chooses to answer. But one of the focus of the PPP funds and the rescue package that we passed a year ago, a little more than a year ago now, and the subsequent funding that we did in the fall as well, which was another hundreds of billions of dollars, was jobs. It was to help people keep their employees. Because if people have their job, then they can go ahead and spend, and they can pay their rent, and they can do the things they need to do to live their lives, and not, and not find themselves, in a real dire situation, living in their car, worst case, or living with their parents or a friend, or, and many of the other outcomes that happen. It was to protect jobs. Now that's true whether you're Boeing or whether you're a nonprofit. I mean, the value of those jobs that people who work in nonprofits are every bit as important as any other industry in the country. And in fact, you could pretty well argue that they're more important because of the people that you're serving. So there's a greater good that you could argue comes from the value of a job in nonprofits. And again, that's the whole point of PPP, was to allow people to pay their employees. And that didn't matter if you were a nonprofit or anyone else. Now, some have shrunk. I mean, again, if you go to the hospitality industry, an industry I spent quite a lot of time with, I mean, if you own a hotel or resort, you don't have near the employees you did a year ago. If you're a car dealership, you've got more. I mean, there's a number of companies that, people are begging for workers right now, but there have been some industries that have been hit in a dramatic way and just haven't been able to come back yet. And it sounds like you guys are maybe one of those industries. So, I mean, I hate to hear that, but it's good to know. I want to know if that's what you're dealing with.
It is, because what we're also experiencing, and Jill might be able to talk about this in the data. I see that she's just turned on her camera, but what we're also seeing, and the reason that that job loss is so stark, is that PPP is gone. And if we can't, as nonprofits, bolster community support, which means individual donations or donations from foundations, program support, which is part of every nonprofit's revenue model, if we can't bolster that financial support, we can't pay employees.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that decline, which is a huge reason for supporting some of the legislation that Senator Lee put forward with increasing the charitable deduction, making it above the line so that we can incentivize, charitable giving. And we're working really hard to instill some of those things at the state legislature as well, which I know is not your focus, but when we see a number, and Jill, Brandy, and I, when we sat down and we looked at that survey data just 2 days ago, I think every one of us was shocked about what that meant for our sector, but more importantly, what it means for the clients that our members and our nonprofits serve: the children, the families, the youth, folks experiencing homelessness, our four-legged friends that live in animal shelters, and just the entire landscape of nonprofits, I think, is going to shift dramatically. And we're really fortunate here in Utah that we have such a strong economy, and we have a state constitution that requires a balanced budget, which makes everything sort of, I think, flow in a good way. But when we start to look about how the prolonged pandemic impacts nonprofit budgets and impacts the amount of people that we serve, it's frightening.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be doom and gloom.
No, I don't take it that way at all. But on the other hand, too, we want to be realistic, right? And we have to look at the challenges and say, okay, how do we fix this? So I want to give this just a little bit of context. And honestly, I love the conversation because I'd much rather have an exchange of information here than to have me talk to you. And look, I can tell you everything smart in 30 seconds. And after that, I'm not sure that I'm making, very good use of our time. So I'm glad we can just kind of have a back and forth here. My question to you then is, you said 3,000 jobs. Give me a sense of what percentage that is. Because if you're 3,000 jobs in the automotive industry that hires 2 million people, it's not that big of a deal. If it's 3,000 jobs out of 6,000, or a much smaller number, which obviously you are. So give me a sense of the percentage if you could. And then the second thing is, what about contributions, both in time and donations in cash? How are you there? Have we recovered in people, feeling secure enough themselves that they can give, or you still seeing the impacts of that?
Do you want me to answer that, Kate? Yes. I'd be happy to do that.
Hi, Jill. How are you? I'm
doing well. Thank you very much. We're so glad that you're here. As Kate mentioned, we just completed the survey and closed it. And I don't think I can emphasize enough that what I'm going to share are preliminary analyses. We've got to dig in a little bit deeper, but I'm relatively confident that these numbers will hold.
Okay.
So just so you know, we surveyed our nonprofit members and other nonprofits throughout the state and saw about 122 organizations respond. And then we asked them a series of questions about what they thought about their revenue in 2021 and what they said that they collected in revenue in 2019. In this period in 2019, these 120 some organizations told us that they had revenue of about $1.2 trillion. Is that right? No, I'm sorry, $1.2 billion. I was like, that's way too high. $1.2 billion.
I was going to say,
yeah, I was like, wow, we did great.
Guys. Yeah.
Sorry, missed a decimal point or three.
Yeah.
And then we asked them to project what their revenue would be for all of 2021. So they have a really good idea of what's coming in terms of their grants and their projections from donors. What they told us was alarming. These 125 organizations said that they anticipated their revenue falling to just over 714 million, which is almost just shy of a 40% decrease.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the other thing that we saw over the same time period, we asked these organizations how many people they employed at the end of 2019 and how many people they thought that they would have employed by the end of 2021. They had just about 8,600 employees, and that number they believe will drop to be 5,400, which is about a 37% increase. So these numbers are only for 125 organizations. The nonprofits in Utah make up about 6% of the total workforce. And I don't have this number in front of me, and I apologize for that. But I believe that the total population of employees, of people employed in the nonprofit sector, is 74-ish thousand. So if we I can't extrapolate that in my head that fast, but if we're looking at the same kind of a decrease, it's going to be significant. And the other thing that I think is really important is not just people losing their jobs is horrific and challenging for those people, and it's through no fault of their own. But I think Kate brought out an important point, is that not just that these people are losing jobs, but these are 5,400 people who are working to make Utah better for everyone who lives here. They were working on feeding the homeless. They were working on helping people with mental illness. So the impact of that is significant. And as I don't want to editorialize, but I believe it's tragic.
And so I hate to say with all of that, and it looks like, did we lose the congressman? It looks like
We lost him for a moment. He's back in now.
Great.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, Jill. I lost you for a minute. I couldn't get you back, so I just had to come back in the meeting. I think I got most of what you were saying, though. Anyway, thanks for the information, and it's a little bit of good news, but good news in the sense as we look forward. But I mean, when you're talking about, like you said, more than a 40% or just shy of a 40% reduction in resources at the same time, well, you have not seen a 40% reduction in need. Quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
We actually asked that question.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would like to be able to do. I think
I'm not ready to answer that one. Call me tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
I was going to say, I think what we can do is we can ensure that, Congressman, that your team and you receive this information as we make sure that we have a sound understanding of the data. Okay. We will be putting out a press release and making sure that we're sharing with everyone. Okay. I know we have a couple of our members on the call today, and I wanted to make sure that we had multiple opportunities for our nonprofits to also be able to engage in that dialogue as well. I would like to offer the opportunity now to others on the call. Do you have any questions for the Congressman and his team? And if not, no worries. UNA, we have many. And you can unmute yourself if you would like. You can also put it into the chat. I'm more than happy to read those questions out to everyone so that we can have that conversation. I do want to let Congressman Stewart, Gary, and Connor, I added a Nonprofit Impact Matters website. It's a data hub to the chat that may also help in gaining a deeper understanding as we progress through this data discussion.
Okay, great. Hey, while people ask or think about asking a question, Brandy, can I just have introduce Connor and Gary?
We would love that.
Do it very briefly, but it's important for you all to know them, and I think you do. Gary is the district director. He runs things for me here in the state, and he would be the face that you all would see probably more than others because he is here in Utah. And Gary, I don't know if you can say hi and if you have any thoughts you want to share.
No, hello everyone, and it's been good working with Brandy and Colin and Kate in the past, and some of you others I've seen before, but thank you for having us today.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Again, these guys do incredible work, and then Connor works with me back in Washington. His portfolio includes you all, as well as he does healthcare and a lot of very sophisticated, very intricate pieces of legislation. And he's done fabulous back there. Connor, you want to say hi or anything you want to add?
No, just great to see you all, and great to see some familiar faces that I've been able to chat with, and look forward to connecting with you all in the future as well.
If you can't tell by looking at Connor, he used to play football up at Utah State. But I tell him all the time that I could take him, but he's afraid of me. He won't ever actually wrestle me. So, all right. And Brandy, back to you. Do you have people who want to ask questions or have something else on their minds?
Well, I do want to say Jody from Utah Humanities is saying, "Go Aggies." And
there you go.
any other questions? I know that Kate had a follow-up question. Kate?
Yeah, and it was, we went down a rabbit hole for a second, which I think was really good in terms of data. But I did want to make sure that we knew, if you knew, when Treasury was going to issue guidance on that spending. Can you...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the governor asked me today, and I just said, I don't know. I mean, they told us, and maybe Connor, I'll turn to you back to you and see if you have more insight. But I mean, my understanding is, you know, they are going to issue guidance a month ago, and then 3 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks ago. So I really don't know. I don't think they know, but we do have to keep kind of banging them over the head, saying, hey, this is important, and it's time sensitive. Connor, do you have any updates? Have you heard anything more recently?
No, you hit the nail on the head. It's incredibly discretionary, and we need to continue to drive this conversation. And we're still waiting on this, but we need to continue to drive that, and we'll be continuing to follow up to see when we can get better information on it. Yeah,
so Kate, we'll keep pushing that. But the Treasury is a little bit of their own entity, but what they need to do is hear from us. They need to hear from you. They need to hear from people who are waiting for that. I want to add one other comment on that, and that is, you know, these discretionary funds to the state, $25.5 billion. But I mean, the perfect application of that money is to you guys. I mean, and that's why I was frustrated with the overall package, because it was so much money, of which, if you guys don't know this, you need to. That 1.9 trillion, 9% of it, and I mean no kidding, no exaggeration, 9% of it went to anything that had to do with coronavirus. And they spent so much money on other things that puts pressure on the pressure points that really need it. You know, again, hospitality industry, travel industry, nonprofits, and maybe one or two others. I mean, I absolutely support this reinforcement to the nonprofits. I know you guys need it, and we'll keep at it to try and get them to, you know, get that guidance out. Everyone's frustrated by it.
Well, we appreciate the advocacy, sir. I am curious about something that that Lee has been working on, and I'm curious just kind of like what you're hearing and about the charitable deductions and being able to increase that so that more incentive is placed within our public trust to be able to invest in our nonprofits.
Well, let me tell you, I absolutely support it for a number of reasons. And one of them is just the efficiency of it. The private sector is just way more efficient than the government sector is getting aid and getting assistance to people. And the American people are the most generous people in the world. And I don't say that flippantly. I mean, it's demonstrably true. I made a point in one of the books I wrote about how the percentage of Americans who contribute to nonprofits, the percentage of Americans who volunteered their time to nonprofits. I mean, there's not a country in the world that comes even close to it. And the government, I think, should incentivize that by allowing them to have a higher deduction for that. And we know that it makes a difference as well. You know, you might think, well, people will contribute or they'll volunteer their time regardless of the tax implications. But the reality is that it does make a difference, and it makes a pretty meaningful difference. So I want to support them. Now, once more, I'm going to turn to Connor and see if he has an update on it, because I got to be honest with you, I haven't heard anything as far as that legislation proposal moving forward. But it could be that, you know, I'm not aware of it. And Connor, who spends all of his time every day in this area, you may have more insights than I do. What say you, sir?
we've been waiting for this to come across our desk. We've been hopeful because this is definitely something that, you know, Congressman Stewart has expressed support on and moving forward with, and we're patiently waiting to continue to move forward on this, but we'll be proactive to seek out opportunities here.
You know, it's an interesting kind of coalition that's come together to support this. You know, it's not just one side of the aisle. I really do think that there's bipartisan support for the idea. And it's not terribly expensive to the US government as well. I think when I last talked to Mike about this, but it's been quite a while really. But in order for the legislation to go forward, it had to get a score from CBO. They had to estimate, you know, what impact will this have on revenue? Because it clearly is going to decrease revenue to the US government if they increase the, you know, the rate there. And they were waiting for that CBO score to come back, but I don't think it's going to be significant, and it's certainly going to be a way less than they're spending in other areas anyway. So again, we would be supportive of that. And we probably only have another minute or so, or a couple minutes. Have we missed anyone?
I wanted to open it up for any additional questions. And then I have an advocacy question if we don't have any from the audience. And I just want to allow that opportunity for an awkward silence.
I can fill the awkward silence. I'm always
Thank you,
pretty good
Jody.
at jumping in, if not filling the silence, hopefully not putting my foot in my mouth in the process, which sometimes I do, but I'll do my best not to do that today. First of all, thank you so much, Congressman, and your team for being here today. I love the opportunity to get to talk and chat and hear from you and to hear what's going on in your world, and as well as the way you're supporting us. And just wanted to express my gratitude for not only the first round of CARES funding, but also the American Rescue Act funding that's coming from the cultural nonprofit world. You know, super devastating things happened last year. Cultural organizations were the first to close, will be the last to reopen. But honestly, my anxiety is coming from where we're going to be down the road in the next couple of years. We are fortunate enough to receive some federal funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And where I'm worried is looking forward into how that's going to affect, you know, federal funding for small organizations like us, when there's going to have to be a course correction in the budget, in the federal budget. And maybe any advice you could give us, or you could dust off your crystal ball to say, you know, give us an idea of what might be coming down the road in terms of those kinds of funding issues. Thank you.
Well, Jody, I think you're exactly right, which is, and I kind of alluded to it earlier about, you know, if we focus on the things that really matter and the things that we support, and we can, you know, eliminate some of these things that are kind of nice, but some of them are just so expensive. And Jody, I think you and I've talked through the years about my support for the humanities, and I've made this point, and it's more true now than perhaps it's ever been, and that is we have to find a way to control our federal deficit, or you guys are always going to take the brunt of it. I mean, the pressure points are always going to be on the humanities. They're always going to be on the nonprofits. You're just the easy target. And I would much rather have us had a federal budget that makes sense. And what it comes down to, and I don't want to go into this into a long conversation on this because it's not the point of this call, although I think that many of you would agree with me. But I'll make the point very quickly, and that is we have to finally get a handle around the entitlement spending, which is 70% of our budget: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And I'm telling you, there are proposals there that will fix that. It puts it a long-term, a 70-year trend towards sustainability, towards what the federal government we know we can afford. And if we're able to do that, then we free up the pressure for the other things, for humanities, for National Endowment for the Arts, for National Endowment for Sciences, and these other programs that there's a very specific role for the federal government. So, I mean, that's kind of the needle we're trying to thread, Jody, is at the same time, you know, doing what we had to do on the last year. And look, the last year is just such an aberration. We need to just kind of put it in a box and say, you know, look, it only once a century do you deal with a pandemic. I think we've done a pretty good job, maybe spend a little bit more than I would have, because again, I think the economy is by and large returning. Target the money that we could have spent now on the industries, as I've said now at least twice, the industries that need it, including you guys, But let's put that in a box. But now let's look at the long term. So the long term is good news and bad news. And I think almost universally people understand, hey, we really are coming out of this now. Operation Warp Speed, which was initiated a year ago, is a dramatic example of a success. And one of the things Congress did was we appropriated $10 billion to any drug manufacturer who had what they thought was a possible vaccine, and we allowed them to begin manufacturing of that vaccine before it had gone through human testing. We cut out 7 months of time by doing that, because had we not done that, come January when they had the vaccines, or early December, they would have had to have 7 months of testing at that point, or 6 months of testing. So again, we did some things right, and we're seeing the benefits of that now. I mean, I look forward to the day when we just see each other without the masks, because I do think it's such an emotional reminder to people of the pandemic. It's not only the health implications for it, it's kind of the reminder of what we've been through and what we're going through. And we all want to see each other and look in their eye. And I want to be able to joke with someone and to be able to see their expression. And a lot of times, I mean, about 1,000 times over the last year, I've had to correct myself and say, hey, you guys know I'm kidding, right? Because you can't see their smile, right? And they can't see that I'm smiling. And I really, we know that by midsummer, we're going to hit the threshold that the administration said, 70% by July. That gives us herd immunity, and that opens up the world for us. Hopefully it opens up the world for you guys, whether in the humanities or whether you're in some of the other nonprofit areas that we've already talked about. But that's only a couple more months, so we'll hang on until then. But again, even in the interim, things are much better now than they were 2 months ago. That's apparent, and I think we see it in people's attitudes and their optimism. So I want to conclude with that. We got through this, and we will get through this. And God bless those people who lost people that they loved. We're 500,000 plus here in the United States, and millions throughout the world. And I would never minimize that, but I do share in the optimism that we will get through this, and the better days are here. They're not just beyond us. They really are here upon us now. And we hopefully see that reflected in the work that you guys do.
Well, that is a very optimistic point to close out our time together, sir. Thank you so much.
Well,
this has been a wonderful learning moment. And I can't speak for everyone in Utah, but I can speak for myself. And I know that it's very important for us to be able to have these close relationships with our elected officials and the staff and team that support you in the work you do every day. And I know that we're very grateful at UNA to be able to reach out to Gary, Connor, and yourself, and anyone else on your team, really, to make that connection, to support our nonprofits and helping every community in Utah thrive, because that's what nonprofits do. That's who we are. So Thank you so much for your support.
Brandy, you and your staff and other people do wonderful work. It's an honor to work with you. Thank you. And we look forward to continue to work with you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.